I need to tell you something that happened 3 years ago, because if I don't say it out loud, I'm afraid it might happen again. Every company gets new employees. People come, people leave. It's normal. But one day, a new coworker showed up at my office, and from the moment I saw him, something felt wrong. Not because he was creepy, not because he acted strange, but because he already knew things about me that no one should have known. He knew where I grew up. He knew the name of my childhood dog. And the worst part? On my first day meeting him, he quietly told me the exact date I was going to die. 3 years ago, I worked at a quiet insurance company in Chicago. It wasn't a glamorous job, just cubicles, spreadsheets, and the same routine every day. The building itself was old, one of those tall brick offices that looked normal during the day, but strangely empty at night. I worked on the 7th floor with about 20 other employees, and after a few months, everyone knew each other pretty well. That's why the new guy stood out immediately. His name was Daniel. He showed up on a Monday morning wearing a gray suit that looked a little too formal for our casual office. He wasn't smiling like most new employees. He wasn't nervous either. In fact, he looked calm. Too calm. The manager introduced him quickly during the morning meeting. "Everyone, this is Daniel. He'll be joining the analytics team." Simple enough. But when Daniel looked around the room, his eyes stopped on me. And he stared for just a little too long. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe he was just trying to remember faces. New jobs are stressful. You try to memorize who's who. But when the meeting ended and everyone went back to their desks, Daniel walked straight toward my cubicle. He didn't introduce himself like a normal coworker. He just sat down in the empty chair beside my desk and said something that made my stomach drop. "Your dog's name was Max, right?" For a second, I thought I misheard him. "What?" "Your dog, Max, golden retriever. You had him when you were 12. My chest tightened. Because that was true, but there was no possible way he could know that. I had never posted about that dog online. Max died years ago, long before social media became a big part of my life. So I asked him the obvious question. "How do you know that?" Daniel just smiled. Not a friendly smile, a knowing one. Then he leaned closer and said quietly, "Because I've been watching you for a very long time." I laughed it off at the time. What else could I do? People say weird things sometimes. Maybe he Googled me. Maybe he guessed. Maybe it was some strange coincidence. But over the next few weeks, Daniel kept saying things that made less and less sense. One afternoon, he walked past my desk and casually said, "You shouldn't drive home on Highway 94 tonight." I looked up from my computer. "Why?" He shrugged. "Just a feeling." I ignored him. That night, I drove home the exact same route I always took. Highway 94 was busy as usual, packed with evening traffic. And about 20 minutes into the drive, everything came to a sudden stop. A massive accident had shut down the highway. 3 cars destroyed, ambulances everywhere. If I had arrived just 2 minutes earlier, I would have been directly in the crash. When I got home that night, the first thing I did was check Daniel's employee file in the company system. Something about him was starting to scare me. But when I opened the HR database and searched his name, nothing appeared. No employee record, no hiring date, no paperwork. According to the system, Daniel didn't exist. The next day, I confronted Daniel. I walked straight to his desk and asked, "Why aren't you in the company records?" He looked up slowly. Then he said something I will never forget. "You're asking the wrong question." My throat felt dry. "Then what's the right question?" Daniel leaned back in his chair and calmly said, "Because you're the only one who knows when you die." At that moment, I realized something terrifying. Daniel wasn't predicting accidents. He wasn't guessing. He already knew the future. And somehow, my death was already written in it. After Daniel said that, the office suddenly felt smaller. You know that feeling when a room gets quiet and you suddenly realize everyone else is minding their own business while your world is falling apart? That's exactly how it felt. People around us were typing on keyboards, answering emails, laughing about lunch plans. But for me, everything had changed. Because Daniel had just calmly suggested that my death was already known. And worse, that he somehow knew it. I tried to laugh it off. "Very funny," I said. "You should work in comedy instead of insurance." But Daniel didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. Instead, he leaned forward slightly and said something that made my stomach tighten. "I'm not joking." I forced myself to stay calm. "Then explain it." Daniel looked around the office first, making sure no one was listening. Then he lowered his voice. "You've already died once." For a second, I just stared at him. "Okay," I said slowly. "Now I know you're messing with me." But Daniel shook his head. "No, I'm serious." My chest felt heavy, because the way he said it didn't sound like a joke. It sounded like a fact. "You died 3 years ago," he continued. I laughed again, louder this time. "Daniel, I'm standing right here." He nodded. "Yes, but you weren't supposed to be." Something about that sentence made my skin crawl. He opened a small notebook that had been sitting on his desk. Inside were pages filled with dates, names, and times. Hundreds of them. He flipped through the pages until he found one. Then he turned the notebook toward me. At the top of the page was a date, October 14th, 3 years ago. And next to it was my name. Underneath it was a single sentence written in careful handwriting. "Car accident, Highway 94, fatal." My mouth went dry, because October 14th, 3 years ago, was the exact night of the accident I had barely avoided. The same crash Daniel had warned me about earlier, the one that had shut down the entire highway. I looked back at him slowly. "Did you write this after the accident?" Daniel shook his head. "No." "When then?" He answered without hesitation. "Before it happened." I didn't know what to say. My brain was trying to find some logical explanation. Maybe he was stalking me. Maybe he somehow predicted it. Maybe this was some elaborate prank. But deep down, I already knew something was wrong. Because Daniel didn't look like someone trying to scare me. He looked like someone explaining a simple fact. I pushed the notebook back toward him. "Let's pretend this is real for a second," I said. "Why would you know when people die?" Daniel closed the notebook slowly. Then he gave an answer that made the room feel colder. "Because that's my job." I blinked. "What job?" Daniel looked directly into my eyes. "The same job I've always had." My heart started beating faster. "And what job is that?" He paused for a moment, then said quietly, "I keep track of the ones who escape." The words hung in the air. "Escape what?" I asked. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the office windows. Outside, the city skyline stretched into the afternoon sky. Cars moved through the streets far below. Normal life, normal people. Then he turned back to me. "Death," he said. I laughed again, but this time the sound came out shaky. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" "Yes." Daniel leaned closer. "You were supposed to die in that accident 3 years ago, but you didn't. Something changed." My head hurt. "What are you talking about?" Daniel tapped the notebook. "Sometimes people survive things they weren't meant to survive.